Insectoid Vecna. Before he became the vine-covered lich we know today, one of the earliest designs for Vecna was a terrifying insect-like creature. This design featured a much taller, very thin Vecna with limbs that looked like they were splitting apart. And the most disturbing feature was a chest cavity that could actually open up, suggesting a biology far more alien than human. This version moved away from the zombie trope and leaned into something more otherworldly. Concept artist Michael Mayer Jr. explained that the look was scrapped because it was too difficult to achieve practically. While the insectoid look was incredibly cool, it might have felt too detached from the human tragedy of Henry Creel. This skeletal frame was intended to make him feel like an ancient deity that had long outlived its physical purpose. Vampire Vecna. In the very early stages of the script, Vecna was depicted with extremely pale skin, almost like a classic vampire. The pitch for this version was that his skin wasn't just pale, it was actually rotting away from living in the harsh environment of the Upside Down for decades. To make it even more visceral, the concept included the idea that Vecna would try to clamp his own skin back together to save what was left of his physical form. This would have added a layer of body horror that emphasized his desperation and his refusal to let go of his former self. It's a tragic, gross, and fascinating take that makes him feel less like a powerful god and more like a decaying survivor. The visual of him meticulously stapling and clamping his own flesh back onto his bones would have been one of the most disturbing moments in the show's history. Stitched Vecna. A stitched skin design was also considered, but got scrapped for a very practical reason. It was too much of a spoiler. By showing a creature that was clearly a human man with skin stitched onto him, it might have revealed the Henry Creel twist way too early in Season 4. The final design used vines and muscle fibers to cover him, which looked more like a natural monster of the Upside Down. This allowed the 001 reveal to be a genuine shock to the audience. It is a great example of how character design has to work hand in hand with the mystery of the story. Blind Seer Vecna. This version of Vecna is pure body horror. The design features skin that is completely melted over his eyes, leaving him blind but perhaps more aware psychically. The most striking detail is that whenever he used his powers, he would literally cry blood. This visual would have been a powerful way to show the physical toll his abilities took on his body. It leans heavily into a Hellraiser and tortured soul aesthetic, making every use of his power look painful and bloody. It is a dark, messy, and unforgettable concept that would have made his kills even more gruesome and visceral. Dunkleosteus Vecna. One of the most unique early Vecna designs was inspired by a prehistoric fish called the Dunkleosteus. This ancient predator was known for having a patchwork of bony armor plates rather than traditional scales. The concept artist thought this aesthetic would be perfect for Vecna, giving him a jagged, armored look that felt both ancient and organic. This armor could have been a natural defense mechanism developed over years of surviving the Upside Down's elements. It creates a version of Vecna that is much more bulky and intimidating than the lean version we eventually got. Using a prehistoric fish as a reference point shows just how much the team wanted Vecna to feel like an apex predator that had existed long before the events of the show. Serrated-tailed demobats. Designed in early 2019, this concept served as the approved blueprint for the demobats, passed on to the vendors. In this original version, the creatures were significantly more deadly than the ones we saw swarming Eddie Munson. They featured serrated tail tentacles, specifically designed to wrap around a victim's limbs and slice through flesh like a saw. Later in production, the design was toned down to be slightly less lethal to allow for longer action sequences where characters could actually survive an encounter. If these original flesh-cutting bats had stayed, the stakes in the final battle would have been impossibly high. The Stalker. In concept art of him in the school hallway, this Vecna design is one of the strangest designs in the vault. Michael Mayer Jr. admitted he wasn't sure what he was thinking with this one, as it features a wide, fixed grin on a pale face. While some might find the look a bit goofy, it is actually that human-like quality that makes it so unsettling. It is likely the design was scrapped because it felt a bit too campy or out of place for the dark tone of Season 4. However, a monster that smiles while it hunts you is a classic psychological horror trope, much like the entities in the Smile movies, and it definitely would have left an impression on viewers. Hellraiser Vecna. This version featured a gaunt figure with a patchwork of skin stretched tightly over his frame. The inspiration here was explicitly the Cenobites from Hellraiser, focusing on a surgical, stitched-together look. It is a very lean, painful-looking design that emphasizes Vecna as a victim of his own environment as much as he is a ruler. The patchwork skin implies that he might have been repairing himself with whatever he could find during his exile. This is one of the most human human-looking monster designs, focusing on the distorted anatomy of a person rather than a complete creature transformation, making it deeply personal and terrifying. Barb's brutal fate. This concept shows that Barb's dead body was meant to be much more graphic to highlight the horror of being consumed by the Upside Down. The art showed her ribs actually poking out of her stomach as something grew inside her. In the original script, there was even a description of a spider crawling out of her mouth, which was incorporated into this design. The Duffers eventually moved away from this look because it made Barb unrecognizable. They felt it was more important for the viewer to clearly see that it was her, rather than just a pile of gore. It is a rare look at how extreme the show almost got with its body horror. Warped Limb Demogorgon. In this plant-inspired concept, the limbs are twisted to mimic branches found in the Upside Down. The legs and arms look like gnarled wood, suggesting the environment itself reshaped the creature. This would have allowed the Demogorgon to perfectly camouflage itself within the dark woods. It is a terrifying thought that a monster you cannot see until it literally unfolds from a tree. This version emphasizes the warped nature of the world over traditional biology. Reaper Vecna. Reaper concept explored giving Vecna a tattered, dark hood, which many fans compared to the Red Skull wearing a cloak in Avengers Infinity War. Along with the cloak, the design played with a decaying skin texture, suggesting his body was in a state of permanent, infectious rot. The cloak gives him a grim Reaper vibe, making him feel like a ghost or a legend rather than a physical man. It adds a layer of mystery and majesty to his character that the final version traded for a more organic feel. It is a very high fantasy take on the character that would have changed the entire atmosphere of his reveal in the Upside Down. The Burnt Monster. This early design features a dark and almost melted skin texture. This version looks as if Vecna has been perpetually burned by the lightning and harsh atmosphere of the Upside Down. It is a much darker color palette than the final pinkish-red flesh we saw on screen. This burnt look makes him feel much more aggressive and hardened, like a warrior who has survived a literal hell for decades. The charred texture adds a lot of grit to the character, moving him away from the slimy look of the other monsters and into something that feels more solid, ancient, and intimidating for his enemies. Twig Demogorgon. This design shows that the showrunners considered a plant-like evolution for the Demogorgon. Instead of just muscle, this version features twigs and vine-like growth sprouting from its shoulder blades. It suggests the creature is a biological extension of the Upside Down's forest landscape. This move toward a flora-based design makes the monster feel less like an animal and more like an invasive species. It's a subtle touch that would have fundamentally changed how we view the entire ecosystem. Xenomorph Vecna. This design leaned heavily into a biomechanical look, inspired by the Alien movies rather than a standard monster. The thinking was that the Upside Down is such a transformative environment that it would have evolved Henry Creel over time into something closer to a Demogorgon or a Xenomorph than a human being. It features a smoother, more extraterrestrial skin texture and an elongated head shape that feels like a biological helmet. This would have reinforced the idea that the Upside Down erases your humanity physically, replacing skin and bone with a cold, predatory biology. Cactus Demogorgon. This alternate Demogorgon matches the entities described in the original pilot script. It looks like a giant, pale white cactus that grew legs and a mouth. Fans often find this scarier than the final version because of its unearthly silhouette. It feels devoid of animal logic, appearing as a mutation that simply shouldn't exist. The pale white color makes it stand out in the dark, giving it a ghostly, haunting presence that is truly alien.